It was a rainy evening in the heart of a busy city when Emily found herself stranded, both physically and emotionally. She had just lost her job, her apartment lease was ending, and her relationship of 4 years had abruptly fallen apart. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, she wandered through the crowded streets, the city lights blurring through her tears. Emily found a bench in a small park and sank onto it, numb and exhausted. She pulled her coat tighter around her, hoping to disappear, to slip into the background of the world that suddenly felt overwhelming and heartless. As she sat there, lost in her sorrow, she barely noticed a stranger approaching her. "Are you all right?" came a gentle voice from beside her. Startled, she looked up to see a man standing under an umbrella, his face kind and concerned. He looked to be in his 30s with a warm expression that softened the lines of his face. Emily quickly wiped her tears, embarrassed to be seen in such a vulnerable state by a stranger. "Yes, I'm fine," she managed to say, her voice wavering. But the man didn't move. Instead, he sat down next to her, holding the umbrella so it covered them both. "Sometimes," he said softly, "it helps to talk. I'm James, by the way." There was something in his tone that made her feel safe, as if he genuinely wanted to listen. She hesitated, but then, almost involuntarily, the words came tumbling out. She told him about her job, her heartbreak, her feeling of complete and utter helplessness. As she spoke, James listened intently, nodding and offering quiet reassurances. He didn't interrupt or judge, only listened with an empathy that felt like a balm on her wounded heart. They sat there for what felt like hours, and Emily found herself feeling lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. She was surprised by how much better she felt just by sharing her pain with someone who cared. When she finally finished, James looked at her with a soft smile. "It sounds like life has given you a lot to handle, but I believe in second chances and fresh starts. Sometimes the hardest moments lead us to where we're meant to be." His words lingered in her mind, and in that instant, Emily realized she had found an unlikely ally. She thanked him, expecting him to leave, but instead, he offered her a place to stay for the night, a spare room in his apartment. Initially, she hesitated, wary of trusting a stranger, but something about him felt safe and genuine. With nowhere else to go, she accepted. That night, James made her tea, set out a warm blanket, and left her to rest. She fell asleep feeling a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly but surely, Emily began to rebuild her life. She found a new job in a cozy bookstore, a place where she could escape into the world of stories and meet kind souls like her. She secured a small but welcoming apartment with a view of the park where she had first met James. It wasn't much, but it was hers, a symbol of the fresh start she had fought so hard to achieve. Through all of this, James remained by her side. They would often meet at the park, sharing coffee and stories. Their bond grew deeper, and with time, Emily realized that she felt something more than friendship for him. She tried to ignore it, afraid to ruin the pure, comforting relationship they had, but the feeling only grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat together on her apartment balcony, looking out over the city lights, she found the courage to speak. "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know how to thank you. You came into my life like an angel, right when I needed someone the most. You've given me more than you'll ever know." James turned to her, his expression soft, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Emily, helping you helped me too. You may not realize it, but you've given me hope again, made me believe in kindness and connection." In that moment, she knew that their connection went beyond mere friendship. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they intertwined with his. "James, I don't know where I'd be without you," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "You saved me in every way." They shared a long, tender embrace, and in that instant, everything became clear. Emily's heart, once broken and battered, was full again, full of love and gratitude and a new sense of purpose. Months passed and their bond deepened, evolving into a love that was as gentle as it was powerful. They learned each other's secrets, shared their dreams, and comforted each other through lingering fears. James confessed to her that he too had been lost before they met, struggling with his own burdens. Helping her had given him new meaning, a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he'd been missing. On the anniversary of the day they first met, James surprised her by taking her back to the park bench where she had sat that rainy evening. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the park, and he knelt down, holding her hand with the same tenderness he'd shown her from the start. "Emily," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "you were the light that saved me when I was lost in darkness. I want to spend my life showing you the same love and kindness you've shown me. Will you be my partner, my love, my family?" With tears streaming down her cheeks, Emily nodded, her heart overflowing with love. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times. "Yes." As they held each other, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not only for the man who had become her guardian angel, but for the strength she'd found within herself to rise from the ashes of her past. She realized that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the strangers who walk into our lives are angels in disguise, guiding us back to ourselves. Together, Emily and James began a new chapter, building a life filled with love, kindness, and the resilience to face whatever came their way. And every time she looked into his eyes, she saw a reminder of how far she had come, how one act of kindness from a stranger had changed her world forever. The days that followed their engagement were filled with an indescribable joy, a sense of peace and warmth that Emily had never thought she'd feel again. She and James began dreaming of a future together, a future filled with love, laughter, and the quiet strength they'd found in each other. They spent their days planning a life that honored their journey, cherishing each little detail, knowing how hard-won their happiness was. Yet life, as they both knew too well, had its own rhythm, and soon another trial awaited them. Just a few months before their wedding, James was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Emily had noticed him feeling more tired lately, brushing it off as the stress from work or wedding preparations. But when he fainted one evening while they were out at dinner, her heart filled with dread. Hours later, in the sterile silence of the hospital, a doctor confirmed their worst fears. James would need a risky heart surgery. Emily's world shattered once again. She stayed by his side, holding his hand, trying to be strong for him even as her heart raced with fear. She couldn't lose him, not after everything they had been through together. But James, always her rock, looked at her with calm determination. "Emily," he whispered, his voice soft but resolute, "we've made it through so much together. We'll get through this too." Despite his words, Emily saw the worry in his eyes. She spent nights by his hospital bed, watching him sleep, praying silently for his recovery. Their days turned into hospital visits, medical tests, and endless conversations about things they had never dared to discuss, their fears, their dreams, and their promise to one another to cherish each moment they had left. One rainy night, just like the night they had first met, James took her hand in his as she sat beside him. He looked weaker than ever, his face pale and drawn, but his eyes held the same warmth that had comforted her in her darkest times. "Emily," he said quietly, "there's something I need you to know. No matter what happens, you've given me a life worth living. Meeting you was my miracle, my second chance at happiness. If something goes wrong, I need you to promise me that you'll keep living, that you'll find happiness. Not for me, but for you." Tears filled her eyes as she shook her head. She couldn't imagine a life without him, couldn't imagine losing the one person who had brought her from darkness to light. "James," she whispered, her voice breaking, Don't ask me to make that promise, I don't know if I can, but James only smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Promise me, Emily, you've given me so much strength, so much love, and I want you to live fully, with or without me. In that moment, she realized the depth of his love for her. He wanted her to find peace, even if it meant letting go. And though her heart was breaking, she nodded, leaning close to him, wrapping her arms around him as she whispered her promise through silent tears. The night before his surgery, they held each other close, as if clinging to the last moments of their life together. They spoke of everything, of their favorite memories, of the dreams they'd shared, and of the love that had transformed their lives. They both knew the risks, but in those final hours, they chose to focus on the beauty they had built together, refusing to let fear overshadow the love they had found in one another. The morning of the surgery arrived and Emily kissed him goodbye, her heart heavy yet filled with hope. As she watched him disappear behind the double doors, she prayed with every fiber of her being that he would return to her, that their love was strong enough to survive even this. The hours dragged by, each moment stretching into eternity. Emily waited, her hands clenched tightly, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. And finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the surgeon approached her with a gentle smile. "The surgery went well," he said, his voice a balm to her frayed nerves. "He's going to make it." Overwhelmed with relief, Emily felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She thanked the doctor, her heart soaring with gratitude and love, and rushed to James's side. He was pale, his face etched with exhaustion, but as he opened his eyes and saw her, he managed a weak smile. "You kept your promise," she whispered, taking his hand, feeling his warmth seep into her soul. "I did," he replied, his voice barely a whisper but filled with love. "For you." In the days that followed, James slowly regained his strength, with Emily by his side at every step. She nursed him back to health, filled with a love so fierce it seemed to spill over into every moment they shared. And as they emerged from that dark chapter, they knew their love had only grown stronger, more resilient, a testament to the power of the connection they had built. A few months later, on a sunlit afternoon, Emily and James stood hand in hand, surrounded by friends and family. Underneath a canopy of golden autumn leaves, they exchanged vows, each word a promise forged through their struggles, a celebration of the love they had fought so hard to protect. As they gazed into each other's eyes, they knew that they were not just two people in love, but two souls who had found their way through darkness, who had lifted each other up when life seemed unbearable. They had been each other's guardian angels, each other's strength, and now they were each other's forever. And as they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, they felt the world around them fade away, leaving only the warmth of their love, a love that had endured, a love that had brought them from the edge of despair to the joy of a new beginning. Their journey had not been easy, but it was theirs, and together they knew they could face anything that life might bring. Months after their wedding, Emily and James settled into a rhythm that felt like a dream. Each day was a gift they cherished, knowing that their love had weathered trials many could never understand. Their life together was filled with small, beautiful moments, shared cups of coffee in the morning, quiet evenings reading on the couch, and long walks through the park where they had first met. One chilly winter morning, as they strolled hand in hand down a tree-lined path dusted with fresh snow, James stopped suddenly, his face lit up with a soft, hopeful smile. Emily looked up at him, a playful smile on her lips. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. James hesitated, his gaze drifting over the snow-covered park. "Emily, there's something I've been wanting to talk about," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's about family, about building one with you." Her eyes softened, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She had always dreamed of starting a family with James, but after everything they'd been through, she had tucked that hope away, not wanting to pressure him or add to his worries. Now, hearing him say the words she had longed for, she felt a surge of joy that she hadn't thought possible. "I would love that," she whispered, leaning into him, her heart full. A few months later, they found out they were expecting. The news filled them with a happiness so deep it left them speechless. Every flutter, every little kick was a reminder of the miracle growing within her. They decorated a nursery together, painting the walls a warm, cheerful yellow and filling it with soft blankets, tiny clothes, and books they planned to read to their child. Life felt more perfect than they'd ever imagined. But fate, as it had before, had one more test in store for them. One evening, in her 8th month, Emily felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. At first, she dismissed it, thinking it was a part of the normal discomfort that came with pregnancy, but the pain intensified. Panic surged through her as she called out for James, who rushed her to the hospital, his face pale with fear. They held each other's hands tightly in the car, both silently praying that their baby would be safe. At the hospital, doctors quickly determined that Emily was experiencing complications. The baby was in distress and they needed to perform an emergency C-section. Emily's heart raced, fear gripping her as she looked at James, who held her hand, his eyes full of reassurance despite his own terror. "Whatever happens, Emily, remember that you are my everything," he whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek. "We'll get through this together." Hours passed, every minute stretching into eternity. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the doctor came out with a small, swaddled bundle. It was their daughter, a tiny, beautiful miracle, her eyes barely open, her fingers curling around Emily's as she held her for the first time. Tears streamed down their faces as they gazed at their child, overwhelmed by a love they had never known. But just as they began to believe everything would be okay, Emily's health took a sudden turn. She was rushed back into surgery for complications from the delivery. As they wheeled her away, she held James's hand tightly, her gaze full of love and fear. "Take care of her, James," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Promise me." James nodded, barely holding himself together, feeling a fear that gripped him to his core. He cradled their newborn daughter, watching helplessly as Emily disappeared beyond the double doors. Hours passed, each second an agony as he paced the hospital corridor, praying with every fiber of his being that Emily would come back to them. At last, a doctor emerged, his expression grave yet hopeful. "She's stable," he said, and James's knees nearly buckled with relief. Emily had pulled through, her strength once again defying the odds. In the days that followed, Emily recovered slowly, each day bringing them a bit closer to the life they had dreamed of. And as she held their daughter, her heart bursting with gratitude, she realized just how much they had endured, how deeply they had loved, and how strong they had become together. She and James often looked at each other in awe, marveling at the miracles that had brought them to this moment. Their daughter, Lily, grew up surrounded by a love that was unwavering, forged through trials and filled with an appreciation for every moment. James and Emily devoted themselves to giving her the life they had fought so hard for, teaching her the values of resilience, kindness, and gratitude. They told her stories of the love that had brought them together, of the hardships they had faced, and how she was the light that had guided them through the darkness. Years passed, and life continued with its ups and downs. But through every challenge, they remained each other's anchor, each other's safe harbor in a world that was sometimes harsh and unpredictable. They celebrated every victory, big and small, and faced each hardship with the knowledge that their love could endure anything. One evening, as they watched Lily play in the garden, Emily leaned her head on James's shoulder, a peaceful smile on her face. "I still remember that rainy night in the park," she murmured, her voice filled with wonder. "Who would have thought that a stranger could become my guardian angel?" James wrapped his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And you became mine," he whispered. "You gave me a life worth fighting for. You gave me a reason to believe." They sat together in silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, the world around them bathed in a soft, golden light. And as they held each other close, they knew that their love, a love born from pain and resilience, was the greatest miracle of all. They were each other's light, each other's strength, and together they had found a happiness that was as deep and enduring as the love that had brought them together. For they knew that, no matter what life held in store, they would face it together side by side, forever bound by a love that had truly saved them both.